Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Jade Dynasty Season 3 based on novel. So let's start. The black-attired person standing at the entrance was indeed the mysterious figure of Ghost King sect, Mr. Ghost. Wild Dog Taoist, after being subdued by Ghost Lee, stayed at Ghost King sect for a period of time, and had at least seen Mr. Ghost a few times. Although as to what kind of person Mr. Ghost was, he still knew very little, but he clearly understood the fact that that person's status was not low and not one that could be mentioned in the same breath as him. Now that he encountered this person at such place out of a sudden, how would Wild Dog Taoist not be shocked? Zhu Yixian and Xiao Huan did not know the identity of this mysterious man in black, but looking at the faint look of fear on Wild Dog Taoist's face, expected that this person most likely was not a good person, and could not help but tense up. Mr. Ghost paused in his drift. He did not expect that there were people in this secluded unfortunate place, and one of them even recognized him. He could not help but be startled. A moment later he took a good look at the three people, especially at Wild Dog Taoist. Mr. Ghost then calmed down. He assessed Wild Dog Taoist and again at Zhu Yixian and Xiao Huan, and finally back to Wild Dog. His calm voice said, "Are you Wild Dog Taoist?" Wild Dog Taoist had seen this Mr. Ghost several times previously, and usually behind Ghost Lee in Ghost King sect, looking at this mysterious black figure from afar. Now that Mr. Ghost was right in front of him, it was the first time. When he heard Mr. Ghost speaking and actually recognized himself, he could not help but was startled, paused for a while before saying, "Yes." Mr. Ghost faintly said, "Aren't you always with Ghost Lee Gongzi? Why are you at this place, and who are these two people?" Wild Dog Taoist wanted to ask him back, why couldn't he come when he himself could be here, but he didn't dare to speak it out. Only quietly said, I separated from Ghost Lee and will go look for him soon. These two are my friends." Mr. Ghost's words were insipid, as if totally ignoring Wild Dog Taoist's tone of emphasis, whether intentionally or not, on Ghost Lee. These two words said, "Oh, okay, but you still have not say, why are you here?" Wild Dog Taoist was speechless for a moment, and did not know how to explain. Instead it was Zhu Yixian, who was watching Mr. Ghost for a while, spoke. "It is because this old man me has a relative's spirit tablet here. We came to pay our respect." Mr. Ghost's gaze concentrated and then saw, behind the three of them, a derelict spirit tablet was erected on the altar table. A few words were written on it, "Beloved son, Zhu Xingyun Memorial Tablet." Mr. Ghost nodded and then pondered a moment. The gleam in the eyes behind the veil seemed to be flickering, unhurriedly said, "Since you all have already paid your respect, this place is after all for spirits' tombs. It is not advisable to stay for a long time, better quickly leave." Wild Dog Taoist turned to Zhu Yixian and Xiao Huan. He was clearly unwilling to stay a minute longer with this ghostly figure, and with Mr. Ghost's words, seemed like if it was not because of Ghost Lee, he might use his skills to retain them. But even though it was so, Wild Dog Taoist was not sure if Zhu Yixian understood that they could not afford to offend this person, and when he glanced over just now, Zhu Yixian had deep affections for his son who died young, and now that out of a sudden someone abruptly issued an order for the guests to leave, with his usual temperament, not sure if he would explode with anger. Sure enough, when the Wild Dog Taoist turned back to look, his heart suddenly sank. Zhu Yixian was still fine, his face tight, and seemed to be contemplating something. His eyes too seemed to be strangely wandering around. Xiao Huan's graceful face instead revealed anger. Obviously infuriated by this man in black's words, her mouth opened and she seemed about to rebuke. Wild Dog Taoist panicked. Sweat appeared on his forehead, crying in alarm in his heart. While he was panicking, suddenly Zhu Yixian stepped forward, walked to Xiao Huan and blocked her. Xiao Huan was about to speak and got a shock, said, "You this, grandfather, what are you doing?" Zhu Yixian glanced at Mr. Ghost, who was standing at the entrance like a ghost, indifferently said, "Nothing, we came to only visit your dad. Since we have already paid our respects, let us go, anyway we don't have anything to do here." Xiao Huan was nonplussed, for a moment speechless. Wild Dog Taoist heaved a sigh of relief. His heart, which had jumped to his throat, returned to its place, hurriedly walked forward, said, Yes, we better quickly leave." Xiao Huan was a clever girl, comprehended the situation, and did not insist, nodded her head. The three of them hastily packed up their things, with Wild Dog Taoist leading, walked to the entrance. Mr. Ghost quietly let out a path, drifted into the dim area of this tomb place, looking like Inspector. The three of them quickly walked out of this house. The sun shone down on them once again. After a few steps, the door behind them was heard closing by itself without any draft, making an eerie sound of a woo-woo, and with a pong shut close. After walking with quick steps and leaving this morgue far behind, almost not in their line of view anymore, the three of them then stopped. Wild Dog Taoist and Zhu Yixian heaved out a long sigh at the same time. Xiao Huan glanced at them, frowned and said, "What happened to both of you? Why so afraid?" Zhu Yixian ignored her, pondered with his head bowed and then raised his head up and spoke to Wild Dog Taoist. "I heard you called him something, Mr. Ghost. Who is he?" Wild Dog Taoist hesitated for a moment, said, "He is the most mysterious figure in Ghost King sect. Like an honored elder figure, usually he is always with Ghost King. I am not sure, too, what kind of person is he, but he is definitely not an ordinary figure." Zhu Yixian, frowning tightly, did not speak. Xiao Huan felt puzzled. Her grandfather seldom went into deep thoughts, could not help but curiously asked, "Grandfather, what is it? Do you feel that this person is strange too?" Zhu Yixian slowly nodded, his speech slow and serious, said, "This person is indeed not a simple person, we cannot underestimate him. And just now in the house, did you all notice at the right-hand corner, 3 kai away from the wall, what is it?" Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist were stunned, carefully recalled, but it was still Xiao Huan who was more detailed, frowned and said, "Grandfather, I remembered other than the coffins lying in a mess there isn't anything else." Zhu Yixian coldly snorted, said, "Right, it is coffins." Wild Dog Taoist asked in bewilderment, "What is strange about coffins? That is a mortuary, naturally there are coffins." Zhu Yixian rolled his eyes at him, said, "What do you this good-for-nothing know? Of course the other coffins are not important, but there is one coffin that is different from the rest. It is not only cleaner with less dust than the rest, its position facing the north and south are extremely accurate, and especially its location is at where the yin energy is densest in that mortuary." Zhu Yixian's expression became more serious and said, "Actually I too did not thought about these. That coffin was not that conspicuous, but when Wild Dog first called out that Mr. Ghost, my heart jumped and I secretly observed the house's unearthly feng shui, and really, it showed me some hints. I'm afraid this person is really from the way of ghost and uses the yin energy to recuperate." However, Zhu Yixian looked bemused, slowly bent his head, perplexedly said, "Just that although the cultivation ways in the evil sect are mostly unusual, but this kind of forces of evil skills seems to be more commonly seen in southern border shaman witchcraft. How can it be that this person has it?" Wild Dog Taoist suddenly interrupted and said, "That is not necessarily so. There is an old fellow in Wan Du clan named Blood-Sucking Demon, other than his famous blood-sucking skill. Doesn't he also knows 5 ghost-governed spirits formation?" Zhu Yixian with a pei sound, said, "Don't try to act like you know. That useless blood-sucking demon fellow learnt some short-changed skills from somewhere, forcibly captured some innocent spirits, and then deliberately acted mystery to deceive people. When it was time to really use it, most likely he would be struck down once he uses his skills. The southern border shaman witchcraft is extensive and profound, and has even more exceptional achievements in the way of ghost faction. How can it be mentioned in the same breath as that useless thing?" Wild Dog Taoist was stunned, but recalling back, he felt that it was really as what Zhu Yixian had described. The person that blood-sucking demon ambushed on the road was that Qingyun disciple, Zhong Xiaofan. When he first used the 5 ghost-governed spirits, his formation was broken inexplicably by Zhong Xiaofan. Although the situation was rather bizarre and weird and Zhong Xiaofan's weapon was sinister, but in any case it was because the blood-sucking demon was useless. As such, Wild Dog Taoist could not help but felt somehow disdain towards that blood-sucking demon, and had forgotten how he had struggled and begged for mercy from him. Xiao Huan, standing beside him, frowned and said, "Grandfather, but however, Father's spirit tablet is still in the house. Now that there is a monster inside, will it be all right?" Zhu Yixian slowly shook his head, said, "Your father had passed away for many years. This instead doesn't matter, but in there after all is where your father's spirit tablet is. I only have one son. I cannot just ignore it." Wild Dog Taoist was startled, stared and said, "What did you say?" Zhu Yixian snorted and said, "Naturally I want to go back and take a look again. I cannot just leave like this." Wild Dog Taoist's face turned pale for a moment, angrily said, "That is someone you normally can afford to provoke, do you know?" Zhu Yixian with a pei sound ignored him, muttered to himself, according to logic, this type of martial artist from the way of ghost, the yin energy at night is the strongest. It is also the best time for him to recuperate quietly. If we were to explore, it is best to do it during the day. Just that since we encountered him, we can't go back this early, we better wait for the night. Xiao Huan nodded, said, all right, and then thought of something, turned and spoke to Wild Dog Taoist, priest, why not you don't come along, grandfather and I, because of my father's spirit tablet, which is still there, we are really worried and therefore we have to go back. Wild Dog Taoist, after being looked at by Xiao Huan's bright eyes, was about to speak with his mouth opened, suddenly shut his mouth, after a long while, said, let's go together. Xiao Huan was surprised but still smiled and said, oh is it, priest, you are really a good man. Wild Dog Taoist was silent, Zhu Yixian who was beside, sneered, his tone seemed to suggest something else. And so the three of them waited in this secluded alley. Initially they could still see a few human figures from a distance, but as the day turned night, even those few shadows also gradually disappeared. Most likely it was because of the mortuary. When the night finally came, the Heyang city, which was bustling for the whole day, the people shrouded in fear of the calamity, finally passed another day, tired, the people in every corner of the city, carrying their fear and at loss for the future, quietly fell asleep. Who would bother about things happening around them? There was no moon in the night sky, dark clouds heavy, Heyang city appeared to be a blanket of dimness. Only at the distant horizon, there were 1 or 2 weak stars, facing each other from a distance, emitting faint lights. The night wind blew, carrying a trace of chill and cold, making a thin whining sound, quietly blowing past the top of the city. The three of them quietly came to the entrance of the mortuary at the end of the alley. Under the dim light, they could vaguely make out the derelict entrance walls. The cold wind, su-su, blew. There seemed to be a chilly wind blowing constantly from within. Zhu Yixian's neck shrank. Seemed like he was cold. Wild Dog Taoist beside him also had the chills in his heart, but he quietly looked to the side, saw Xiao Huan's graceful figure was just standing beside him, her face also tensed and watching the darkness ahead. Wild Dog Taoist's initial cowardice disappeared without a trace. Zhu Yixian watched that darkness for a long time. He seemed to be contemplating something. After a long time turned around, took out a few yellow paper charms from his bosom, twisted obscure drawings indistinctly, could be seen drawn on it. Unable to see clearly what they were exactly in the darkness. Zhu Yixian passed 2 to Xiao Huan, hesitated for a moment, stretched his hand and also gave 2 to Wild Dog Taoist, whispered, these 2 spiritual charms, the big one keep it concealed close to your body. It can ward the ghostly energy from invading the body, the small one keep it in your hands. If things go wrong, immediately recite the incantation, and you can escape. After speaking, Zhu Yixian quietly told them the incantation. Xiao Huan most likely had already knew the incantation, nodded and looked relaxed, but Wild Dog Taoist instead felt overwhelmed. He had never heard those strange incantations. Not only it was a mouthful to say, it twisted and turned, extremely difficult to memorize. Wild Dog Taoist almost doubted, if really something were to happen, before he could finish reciting, he would already be dead in Mr. Ghost's hands. But whatever it was, although he didn't know if Zhu Yixian, this Jianghu scammer's magic would work this time, Wild Dog Taoist in the end still memorized with his heart. After about the time to brew a cup of tea, he finally managed to remember this mouthful of incantations. Zhu Yixian listened to Wild Dog Taoist's recitation of the incantation, nodded his head in indication, this time while teaching Wild Dog Taoist the skills to escape. It was rare to see him not losing his temper, not sure if it was because he himself knew the incantations were too hard to remember. Zhu Yixian composed himself, pointed in the direction of the mortuary entrance. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist both nodded at the same time. Zhu Yixian inhaled deeply, then slowly moved his feet forward. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist followed behind him. They could only see darkness ahead, an unexplainable strangeness. And at this tense moment, suddenly behind them in a distance, faint sounds were heard. The sound was similar to the cries of the insects on normal days. Zhu Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist did not mind it, but Xiao Huan suddenly shook, whipped her head around, looked behind. Her abrupt action shocked the two men, thinking something had happened, quickly turned around to investigate, but found nothing behind. Zhu Yixian asked in surprise, Xiao Huan, what is it? Xiao Huan's expression was uncertain, looked a little strange too, hesitated for a moment, said, Grandfather, I seem to hear Xiao Hui calling. Zhu Yixian frowned, said, Xiao Hui, what Xiao Hui? His voice suddenly froze, whispered, you mean that monkey beside Ghost Li? Xiao Huan nodded but her face looked slightly confused, slowly said, but now there is no sound. Have I mistaken it? Both Zhu Yixian and Wild Dog Taoist looked far into the small alley and saw only darkness. Where are Ghost Li and Xiao Hui's shadows? Zhu Yixian stared at Xiao Huan. Xiao Huan turned red, turned over. For some reason, she looked dazed. Wonder what she is thinking about. Wild Dog Taoist saw it. An inexplicable expression flashed past his dog face, slowly lowered his head. Zhu Yixian said, all right, don't imagine things, let's go in. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist nodded. The three of them walked gingerly to the entrance of the derelict entrance, saw that in the small courtyard, the vegetation withered, extremely dilapidated, everywhere was darkness, and nothing there, but it seemed like behind every shadow, there was a pair of cold eyes looking at them. The cold wind blew, it was really an uncanny, unearthly ghostly atmosphere. Zhu Yixian swallowed his saliva, lightly walked in. Their footsteps stepped onto the grasses in the courtyard, in the silence, though they were extremely careful, but they still made very light footstep sounds, resounded in their own ears. It seemed to be louder many times more than in the day. As they went near that mortuary, their heartbeats could not help but palpitated. Xiao Huan even wondered how could her heartbeats be so loud, afraid that others might hear it too. And it was also at this time, the house which was pitch dark, a sound, although light, but right now like thunder in their eyes, suddenly started, a burning ball of fire, lighted up suddenly, and that fire color was an uncanny faint dark green. Zhu Yixian and the rest were shocked. In this unearthly night in an instant they felt, the rays behind them were like stabs, even their hairs were standing up. That bit of dim dark green otherworldly fire in the house was quietly burning. From the gap between the house it slowly illuminated, an unexplainable mystery. Even the night breeze around them sounded more and more like ghost wailings. While the three of them were nonplussed and thought they were being discovered by the person in the house, that dim dark green fire after being lighted was quiet and did not have any reaction. The three of them outside the house did not even dare to breathe out loud. After a long time, after confirming that the dim dark green fire did not light it up because of them, they were then secretly relieved, but what followed after that was curiosity mixed with fear. Zhu Yixian, frowning tightly, contemplated for a moment, made a gesture to Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist and then quietly moved forward, came to the side of the house. This mortuary had been abandoned for many years and had long been falling apart. He easily found a gap and crouched down, looking carefully into the house. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist also followed over, crouched down beside him and each found a gap to look quietly. In the middle of the dark house, a dark green fire was giving out light. That fire was not any oil lamp fire, it was a tiny ball of light suspended in mid-air, like a flame quietly burning. Mr. Ghost figure was not seen in the house. Only under the faint dark green light illumination, the abandoned coffins looked especially creepy. Outside the house, Xiao Huan's face turned more pale, her teeth gently biting her lower lip, looking up. On that altar table, Zhu Yixian's son, Zhu Xingyun's memorial tablet was still there, the other tablets were still the same, lying scattered on the table, clearly although Mr. Ghost was here, but he had no interest in those tablets. Zhu Yixian was relieved. Seemed like when he saw his son's memorial tablet was safe and sound, he could lay down his worries. Xiao Huan suppressed her voice, whispered, Grandfather, what do we do now? Zhu Yixian was not those chivalrous heroes. Tonight risking his life here was all for his son's tablet. Now that he found out Mr. Ghost had no interest in this tablet, his son was safe and sound. Naturally he did not wish to stay any longer. Furthermore the place was eerie and naturally not suited for Zhu Yixian. Who knows if it would hinder his cultivation. Since he had decided, Zhu Yixian turned and quietly said, let's go. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog both nodded. The three of them were about to turn to leave, but unexpectedly at this moment, Zhu Yixian, feeling relieved, did not pay attention to his footsteps. When he turned, he kicked something like a stick on the ground and immediately it rolled out from the courtyard, making a loud sound. The three of them froze. Xiao Huan angrily said, Grandfather. Zhu Yixian was full of embarrassment. While he was about to make up some excuses, suddenly a cold sneer was heard from behind, like a bone-penetrating cold. The decrepit wall behind them suddenly collapsed. The darkness and dark green light instantly surged out from that house, soon to envelope them three. Zhu Yixian became pale. suddenly raised his hand, waved the yellow charm, anxiously said, "Quick go." His mouth urgently chanted, a series of strange sounds from his mouth. At that moment, when the dark green light touched his body, Zhu Yixian's yellow charm activated by the incantations, a yellowish-brown color flashed past. Zhu Yixian disappeared into the thin air. Almost at the same time, within the deep corners of the dark house, a surprised cry of "Yi" was heard. However, although Zhu Yixian escaped in time, the dark green light had arrived in a blink of an eye. Xiao Huan was halfway through her incantation, and not to even mention Wild Dog Taoist. At this critical moment, the incantation, which he was forced to remember, suddenly vanished from his mind. Staring tongue-tied, he could not even recite a single word and could only helplessly wave the yellow charm in his hand a few times, opened and closed his mouth a few times, looking comical. The green light abruptly charged up, enveloped them in. The next moment an extremely icy wind pierced into their bodies from all directions. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist felt their entire bodies' blood being frozen up in an instant. They could no longer resist, and a strong force generated out from the house. The sound of "woo" and both figures sucked in, unable to resist even the slightest. The next minute, banging sounds were heard twice. Most likely it was Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist's bodies that were thrown on the floor inside the house, but for some reason, they did not make any noise. The eerie house suddenly plunged into a dead silence. The long night, cold and silent, nothing moved inside or outside the house. A mist gently drifted past in the dark night, giving one a feeling of unreal. Only that unearthly fire in the house, still silently burning, reminding one of the existence of the strange things here. Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist had been sucked into the house by the green light for a very long time, but since then there wasn't any sound coming out from the house, and the only one who escaped, Zhu Yixian, had also disappeared. Time in this stillness passed by minute, as if the one in the house was also especially patient, quietly waiting. In the silence, suddenly a human figure appeared at the entrance. It was Zhu Yixian. He was frowning tightly and seemed hesitant, but eventually he shook his head, sighed and slowly walked over to the house. Reaching the door, before he could think, a sound of "Gya" was heard from the door. It automatically opened. The faint green light inside silently shone onto Zhu Yixian. "Please come in." An emotionless voice rang out from inside the house. Zhu Yixian composed himself, went in. He looked around and soon found Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist both lying on the ground next to the altar. A quick glance, and seemed like they were not hurt, but both of them were staring with eyes wide opened at him. Their mouths moved a few times, but no sound was made. It was very strange. Wondered if it could be that they were controlled by some strange techniques. And the most attention-grabbing object in the house was that bit of faint green fire hanging in mid-air. At the moment it was above that coffin that Zhu Yixian noticed in the day, and in the coffin below it. Right now Mr. Ghost's emotionless voice was heard. "Land escape's strange skill has been long lost for many years. Didn't expect to see it again today. I wondered which master is your distinguished self be?" Zhu Yixian was silent, watching that coffin, quietly said, "Both of them are young and ignorant. Your distinguished self is an exceptional master. Don't have to be so calculating with those juniors, right?" Mr. Ghost lightly said, "You flatter me. I am just a lonely ghost, dare not take the title of some exceptional master. In the day, I have already told all of you not to come here again, but you all defy my order. What is the reason for it?" Zhu Yixian's eyes flickered, unhurriedly said, "This is where my deceased son's spiritual tablet is, where his spirit traveled to the afterlife. You are from the way of Ghost. How can I not be worried?" Mr. Ghost's voice suddenly paused, after a while drawled, "How do you know I am from the way of Ghost?" Zhu Yixian said, "You take shelter in a place of yin energy, sleeps in a yin coffin, also uses netherworld ghost fire to absorb the unearthly ghostly energy of this 100-years-old mortuary, nourishing your own body. This level of deep skill from the way of Ghost, one who has not immersed long in the way of Ghost for many years cannot use it." Mr. Ghost was silent for a long time, said, "Your distinguished self is really an expert. I have been disrespectful." Zhu Yixian's face had a rarely seen seriousness, said, "You are also a person who sees reason, naturally know what I was worrying. Although my dead son has passed away for many years, but this useless father cannot let him be dead without peace. But today coming over and witnessing, your distinguished self is not someone who misuses his skills, I am now also assured." Having said that, Zhu Yixian actually bowed to that coffin. Mr. Ghost sneered, his tone cold, heard from the coffin, "You don't have to lick my boots that way. Capturing humans' souls this kind of lowly tactic. I of course will not do it, but all of you have violated my prohibition, and so are guilty." Zhu Yixian's countenance changed. He gave a dry cough and said, Actually this is a misunderstanding. Your distinguished self is an exceptional master, why?" Mr. Ghost snorted, ignoring Zhu Yixian's tactic of delaying him. The green ghostly fire in the mid-air suddenly shook, instantly became brighter. Zhu Yixian's face looked troubled, watched that spot of ghostly fire. Green light flashed, the fire gradually became bigger. When it grew to be the size of a fist, the whole room was already enveloped by green light. Even Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist who were on the ground, their faces already reflected green. Suddenly, pong the sound, the green light wavered, that netherworld ghost fire instantly split opened, from 1 to 5, went in 5 directions, followed closely by numerous dark red lights projected soundlessly from the green light. Connected to each other, formed a 5-star formation, emitting auras of eerie ghostly energy from the mid-air, hit them directly in the face. Zhu Yixian's face looked solemn, his pupils slightly contracted, indistinctly looking over, there seemed to be sweat on his forehead. When the formation was slowly forming opposite him, Zhu Yixian hesitated for a moment, took 2 steps back, pulled out several yellow paper charms from his bosom and without saying he first stuck 4 on himself and then at the surrounding ground, chairs, broken rocks. He stuck on a few, it seemed disorganized but a faint response seeming to be coming from it. Just when Zhu Yixian finished his formation, Mr. Ghost's formation had also completed. At that moment, a light flashed from the 5-star formation. Immediately the entire house was suddenly filled with ghosts' wails, extremely ear-piercing. Zhu Yixian trembled, exclaimed, "Ghost howl break." The ghost howl seemingly invisible, but like all conquering, from the formation a stern and sharp light broke out. The rubbles and broken woods along its path flew out upon touch. Even the sturdy slab stone was slashed with a deep cut. Zhu Yixian's white hairs fluttered in the wind, both of his hands stretched out quickly, 2 yellow charms stuck above his ears. Immediately the pain shown on his face receded, followed by his mouth reciting something. His right finger like a sword stabbed the paper charm, his eyes wide open suddenly, stared at that ghost howling. The next moment, the ghost howl collided with Zhu Yixian, almost at the same time. That 4 pieces of paper charms on Zhu Yixian's body and the ones on the ground all lighted up, swiftly condensed into a bunch of green light blocking in front of Zhu Yixian. A loud bang and Zhu Yixian's body flew out, crashed into a ruined wall and dropped down. In the house, the yellow charms floated in the air, helplessly scattering away, and that 5 spots of fire above Mr. Ghost's coffin, once again condensed into one, quietly burning. Zhu Yixian panted heavily, struggling for a while on the ground and slowly climbed up, laughed bitterly. "I am this old already, and you are really not letting me go." Mr. Ghost, after a moment of silence, said, "Your insight, experience, knowledge, all are incomparable to an ordinary person, but why is your cultivation at such a low level?" Zhu Yixian wiped off a faint dribble of blood from his mouth, indifferently said, "So what if my skills are low? There are so many people keen on cultivating Dao in the world. So many highly skilled cultivated martial artists. How many are as carefree as me?" This time Mr. Ghost was silent for a long while and then without speaking, that ghost fire suddenly shook and swiftly flew towards Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist, pausing above them. Zhu Yixian was shocked and while he was panicking, that netherworld ghost fire circled around them once and flew back to Mr. Ghost's coffin. The next moment, for some inexplicable reason, Xiao Huan and Wild Dog Taoist bodies moved, at the same time crying out softly and then scrambled up. Seemed like Mr. Ghost had released the spell on them. Zhu Yixian was surprised and happy, quickly spoke to the coffin, "Thank you, we will go now. Go right now, in the future we will not come even if we are beaten to death." Part 1 end here.